Mujahideen, the Arabic term for one engaged in jihad. The English term jihadists grammatically corresponds to it. Its widespread use in English began with reference to the guerrilla-type militant groups led by the Islamist Afghan fighters in the Soviet-Afghan War and now extends to other jihadist groups in various countries such as Myanmar, Cyprus and the Philippines. In its roots, Mujahideen refers to any person performing jihad. In its post-classical meaning, jihad refers to an act which is spiritually comparable in reward to promoting Islam during the early 600s CE. These acts could be as simple as sharing a considerable amount of one's income with the poor. The modern term of Mujahideen, referring to spiritual Muslim warriors, originates in the 19th century when Pashtun tribal leaders in Afghanistan fought against the British attempts to raid Pashtun territory. It began in 1829 when a religious man, Saeed Ahmad Shah Brelvi, came back to the village of Sitana from a pilgrimage to Makkah and began preaching war against the infidels in the area defining the northwest border of British India. Although he died in battle, the sect he had created survived and the Mujahideen gained more power and prominence. During the Indian Mutiny of 1857, the Mujahideen were said to accept any fleeing sepoys and recruit them into their ranks. As time went by, the sect grew ever larger until it was not only conducting bandit raids, but even controlling areas in Afghanistan. The modern phenomenon of jihadism that presents jihad as the casus belli for insurgencies, guerrilla warfare and international terrorism, dates back to the 20th century and draws on early to mid-20th century Islamist doctrines such as Qutbism. Arguably the best-known Mujahideen outside the Islamic world are the various loosely aligned Afghan opposition groups who initially rebelled against the government of the pro-Soviet Democratic Republic of Afghanistan during the late 1970s. At the DRA's request, the Soviet Union brought forces into the country to aid the government in 1979. The Mujahideen fought against Soviet and DRA troops during the Soviet-Afghan War. Afghanistan's resistance movement originated in chaos and, at first, regional warlords waged virtually all of its fighting locally. As warfare became more sophisticated, outside support and regional coordination grew. The basic units of Mujahideen organization and action continued to reflect the highly decentralized nature of Afghan society and strong loci of competing Mujahideen and Pashtun tribal groups, particularly in isolated areas among the mountains. Eventually, the 7 main Mujahideen parties allied as the political bloc called Islamic Unity of Afghanistan, Mujahideen. However, the parties were not under a single command and had ideological differences. Many Muslims from other countries assisted the various Mujahideen groups in Afghanistan. Some groups of these veterans became significant players in later conflicts in and around the Muslim world. Osama bin Laden, originally from a wealthy family in Saudi Arabia, was a prominent organizer and financier of an all-Arab Islamist group of foreign volunteers. His Maktab al-Khadamat funneled money, arms, and Muslim fighters from around the Muslim world into Afghanistan, with the assistance and support of the Saudi and Pakistani governments. These foreign fighters became known as Afghan Arabs, and their efforts were coordinated by Abdullah Yusuf Azam. Although the Mujahideen were aided by the Pakistani, American, Chinese and Saudi governments, the Mujahideen's primary source of funding was private donors and religious charities throughout the Muslim world, particularly in the Persian Gulf. Jason Burke recounts that, as little as 25% of the money for the Afghan jihad was actually supplied directly by states. Mujahideen forces caused serious casualties to the Soviet forces, and made the war very costly for the Soviet Union. In 1989, the Soviet Union withdrew its forces from Afghanistan. In February 1989, the 7 Sunni Mujahideen factions formed the Afghan interim government in Peshawar, led by Sibghatullah Mojadedi, as an attempt for a united front against the DRA. The AIG became a failure, partly because it could not solve the differences between the factions, partly because of limited public support as it excluded the Iran-backed Shia Mujahideen factions, and the exclusion of supporters of ex-King Muhammad Zahir Shah, and the Mujahideen's failure in the Battle of Jalalabad in March 1989. In 1992, the DRA's last president, Muhammad Najibullah, was overthrown and most Mujahideen factions signed the Peshawar Accords. However, the Mujahideen could not establish a functional united government, and many of the larger Mujahideen groups began to fight each other over power in Kabul. After several years of devastating fighting, in a small Pashtun village, a mullah named Muhammad Omar organized a new armed movement with the backing of Pakistan.